Hello, everyone. There we go. Okay. Yeah, somebody asked, I'll mention, just if you're wondering what English classes are being offered in the spring. By the way, none of you are graduating seniors, are you? Yeah, who told me they were? William is. William is. Yeah, he told me that. I don't know if anybody else has emailed. That I may hear later. I thought Amelia might be, but maybe not. Who does Amelia? William, yeah, he said William does. And who else? Kate, say again? Oh, they push supply in return. All people do that. Oh, she's in my other class. She's in my great works. Okay, thank you. Oh, hey, wait a minute. We're 9 people. This is a record. Okay.
I didn't know until I checked. I wasn't entirely sure it was Tuesday
either. So what's being offered in the spring, in case you want to know, is American Literature 2. If you need, that's something you need for your English major. But it can be used for the minor, too. And it looks like that's going to be Tuesday, Thursday, 2 to 3:15. And then Dr. Stelzer is going to teach Advanced British Literature Sacred Poems. So I guess Christian poetry. Yeah, Advanced British Literature Sacred Poems. Yeah, that would be a good one, yeah. That would be a good one. According to this, it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 10 to 10:50 for that. And then Dr. Kinlaw, who's in the Honors College, he's teaching Modern Literature, Religion, and the Novel on Tuesday and Thursday from 11 to 12:15. Now, I will say, but are any of you seniors? I looked you up, Maria. You're like technically 92 hours, and you're supposed to be 96 hours to be a senior, but I may be able to. That's it? After this semester. Just because they may allow a few people. I am teaching an MLA class on Wednesday night on Tolkien. And that, they were saying that if you're a senior, we might be able to get you in that. Because if you're a senior, you can take a 5,000 level. So if anybody's, I think you have to have 90, if you have 96 hours by the end of the semester, you're a senior. If you want to, we can probably sneak you in, because you have 92, I know. But anyway, we'll take the other classes too, but because it'll be. Yeah, but it's still Lord of the Rings. Yeah, you can't take it if you've already taken it. You can't take it again. I guess it's not like I can teach a different class because they've all had it before. So and it is a fun class though. Take it again. I know it's like you can't take the same class. Can't take the same class. It's kind of fun. What's it? What? Modern Literature, Religion, and the Novel is Tuesday, Thursday, 11 to 12:15. And my class is Wednesdays from 6:30 to 9. We might be able to sneak in there, depending on the room and stuff like that. I mean, hopefully we'll be done with COVID. One hopes that next week COVID will be done with the election. We'll see what happens. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. But those are the 3 we're offering upper level: the American Lit, Sacred Poems, and Religion and the Novel. So those are good. And then now, what's interesting about my class is that my class, my master's class, has more MFAs than MLAs, artists, and they're really cool. And what they do is, I have them do oral reports and presentations and artworks and things. So it's a mixture of them and the MLAs. But you all would do the same thing with two essays, a midterm and a final. I don't know. We might be able to. If you're in the class and you want to do for one of your essays, we'll probably swing that actually. Kind of like we do at the Honors College, Dr. Elliott, something like that. So anyway, but I guess you really have to be a senior. Dr. Stelzer was saying, well, you really need to be a senior to take a master's class. But that's good if you didn't have my Lord of the Rings, but you really wanted to take it, because I'm certainly not going to teach it for another couple of years. That's the one you missed. You had Narnia, but you missed. So we'll see. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, no, in the fall is when I teach Narnia. Yeah, in the fall will be Narnia. Yeah, that's right. You guys didn't have Narnia. You had Lord of the Rings. Oh, good. You know what? I think the one that's allowed for the apologetics minor is the one that I think Ellie took on C.S. Lewis's apologetics. And I might get to that again. I don't know. Spread out. You guys learned that, yeah. That was good. Yeah, so you can get the triple crown if you can get Narnia. Yeah, that's the Triple Crown. You take Narnia, Lord of the Rings, and writings of C.S. Lewis. Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know. Cold wind is blowing from the wardrobe or something like that. I don't know. So be thinking, because when do we start registering? Pretty soon.
Priority is next week.
Next week already. Okay, yeah. So let's put that.
No, we don't have that's why they let us register first. Yeah. But sadly, we have to remind our advisors.
Part of the reason, especially with Honors College, they did it, is because the Honors College has the most ridiculous schedule on campus. And it's impossible to work around. So that's why they originally did that. They did it that way. Oh, yeah, that's true.
They just revamp the honors college to make it more compatible with everything else going on.
Yeah, someday.
That would be logical, but that would also require work, and they don't do that.
They've got a way to do it.
They just don't have time to do people stuff.
They have a way of doing things, and it's called Biola. Okay, and that's the things. So, if you don't get that, it won't make any sense unless you know the joke. What's that? Biola. Okay. Are we ready? Does anybody know what Biola stands for? Or at least uses him? Bible. They call it Bible Institute Los Angeles. I don't know if it's still. Wait a minute. Say that again. Oh, that's right. He did write a play about it. Were you in that? Oh, you were in. You weren't the unsinkable Molly Brown, were you?
No,
Okay.
I was Sophia, and I was the little girl whose uncle died in the ship of Greece.
Oh,
I only
okay.
had 12 lines. It really annoyed me. So I was like, I wanted to do more.
See?
So I made everyone cry.
You went. Oh, you did. Oh, I love
The
it.
most of my 12 lines.
I love it. It's great stuff.
I made a big thing of it.
We should start calling you Maria Sophia. That sounds kind of cool. Maria Sophia. You got a Sophia over here, so that's good. All right, let us take out that handout. It's the end of your horseback. It's 2 pages, and this will really help you when you do your papers. Okay? So let's go through this a little background. Now, the first sentence is not going to make a full amount of sense. Though Dickens shared in the Victorian spirit of progress and its liberal faith that man was by nature good and could be perfected by the elimination of ignorance and poverty, that's what we're going to talk about when we get to Tennyson. So I won't dwell a lot on that. And actually, I used to teach Tennyson before this, but then I thought, you know what, let's get this out of the way. You guys can get your papers in and move on. So just this year, I kind of switched it around. And then we'll have it in the background to talk about, kind of like what we did with Frankenstein. But basically, there is this Victorian idea that we can perfect ourselves, right? That we are, we'll talk about this more later, I'll just say it now, but basically the traditional view is the problem with man is sin, disobedience, rebellion. They started to say, no, the problem with man is ignorance and poverty. And if we can eliminate ignorance and poverty, we can build utopia. We can build the millennial kingdom. And we'll talk about that more when we get to a poem by Tennyson in the coming weeks. But Dickens was part of that. Dickens did believe we can move forward and build this brave new world. Right? But, like I said, Dickens was a little bit critical of some of the ways that people wanted to go about it. And this novel is, I mean, it's still a novel of people and characters, and it's melodramatic, but it's very much a novel of ideas. Maybe more than any of his other novels. This is a novel that specifically was written to critique utilitarianism. And you've probably heard other people say, you've heard me say, a lot of people argue that the real religion of America is utilitarianism. Right? The idea that the most important standard that you can use is utility. And I'm sure you've all heard this before, that famous phrase, the greatest good for the greatest number. And that's how you decide what to do. The greatest good for the greatest number. And, I mean, I guess we're utilitarian now, except for COVID right now. Suddenly, if one person dies, they're not allowed to. It's kind of weird. It's kind of like, if that's true, we better just stop driving our cars, really? Okay? But anyway, did any of you get money back from your, car insurance people over the last year? Because I did, because generally speaking, accidents are down. especially the beginning of the quarantine, because nobody was driving. So a lot of people got rebates because nobody was making claims because nobody was driving. So anyway, we'll just live in our rooms from now on. That'll be it. Just live in our rooms. Go ahead. What's that? Wait, oh, really? Just moving around?
Yeah, there was a period of time during COVID where there were no cops anywhere.
Oh, wow.
There were none.
Oh, they were because, oh, wow.
Yeah,
Oh, really?
When I
Okay.
had to make the drive from Dallas to Houston to move out, it was like, I was driving and I was like, is this like...
What, like 100 miles? How fast were they going? I mean,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, wow. Wow.
I remember it was at 75 and got passed multiple times. I might have
Wow.
what my SUV can do.
Uh-oh, better watch out. What were you going to say? Oh. Oh, that's great. See, nobody out there. This is weird, right? But I mean, basically, there is this idea, and you probably heard the names Jeremy Bentham and James Mill are considered sort of the fathers of utilitarianism, right? And some of you have also heard some people use the pleasure-pain principle, right? You want to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. Again, very much utility. By the way, I'm not a utilitarian, but I do have what I call the pleasure-pain principle of leisurely activity. These people that go on their vacation and do some crazy, super dangerous thing. It's like, buddy, if the pain outweighs the pleasure, like skiing, if the pain outweighs the pleasure, why are you doing it for leisure and paying for it? But I still go out there. We would walk. We go to the national parks. That's what we do. Walk around. That wasn't too bad. But yeah, I don't camp if I have to carry 30 pounds on my back. It's just not worth it. Okay, just simply, it's not worth it. It's like going out to dinner and getting cracked crab where you're going to break open everything. It's not worth it, okay? If I have to fight for every morsel of food, it's not worth it. And I'm especially not going to pay a fortune for it, too. Anyway, so you agree with that. I want my food a little easier. What's that? Oh, the pleasure-pain principle, along with utilitarianism, is you want to do whatever you can to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. So it kind of goes together with the whole idea of utility. That's the most important thing. And sometimes the ends can even justify the means. If utility is, and you all did those things about, what do you do if you're going to kill one person or kill the whole train, all that sort of stuff. These are difficult, ethical questions and whatnot. But legalism, where did that come from? Utilitarianism is much more than that. We say greatest good for greatest number, but what it means is we're going to restructure all of society. All of our institutions are going to be based on that very, very pragmatic and practical measure of success. And that's what we're going to do. And it makes sense that utilitarianism comes along at the same time as the Industrial Revolution. Right? Where workers are being exploited, but look, we're making all of these things, and again, we do need to realize that the reason we can go to Walmart and get cheap goods is partly because of the exploitation of labor. And so sometimes we have to think about these questions, and some people do that for whatever reason. All the fancy pants people have decided that they're going to make their stand with coffee. Right? You heard that? It's got to be like whatever, nicely grown coffee. I don't know why, but that became the big thing or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, fair trade. That's it, fair trade, or something about all these different things about where it's made and stuff like that. So we try to do that, but again, generally speaking, we're all about utility and efficiency, and those may be good things, but they often leave out the human element. Right? Utilitarianism often runs roughshod over individual people and individual struggles and lives and families and whatnot. And Dickens was always very, very human. That's what I love about Dickens. Chesterton was a huge fan of Dickens, and Chesterton said, G.K. Chesterton said, the definition of a humanitarian is someone who loves humanity but hates human beings. But the reason he loved Dickens is because Dickens did not love all systems, but he loved all human beings. And to me, that's something to strive for. I'm suspicious of big things. I'm much more interested on the individual level. And Dickens was that kind of person. And later on, I mentioned this in the outline here, that instead of giving us lots of statistics about workers and exploitation, he focuses on one worker. That's that Stephen Blackpool. Right? In The Christmas Carol, he's able to sum up all of exploitation with what one character that we love. What one character who's going to die. Tiny Tim. Okay? In other words, we're instead of again writing a paper that gives you lots and lots of statistics and things, let's focus in on one individual. Good. That's right. The statistics may end up getting used against him, I guess. And I don't know if you noticed this, but a lot of politicians do this on both sides. Whenever they give speeches, they'll always talk about one individual case. Like if they're talking about healthcare or whatever. And I mean, it's very effective. And sometimes I think they care about the individual. Sometimes I don't think they do. But it's used often.
It's a silly example. It's kind of like in a zombie movie when like millions of people die and then no one cares, but then the dog dies and
That's true. You're right. We only care about the one individual. It's kind of a strange thing, right? But, now, I can't remember who said this. It might have been Tocqueville or somebody I read where they said, what's unique about God is that he can love all people as a group and every individual at the same time, which none of us can do. None of us can love every single individual. We just don't have that capacity, right? But God can do that. It's one of the unique things about God. There are others. Anyway, so look at number 2. In its search for efficiency, right, it privileges logical, systematic thinking over imaginative sentiment and religious feeling. It's very, very left-brained rather than right-brained, and it advocated a dispassionate, it's sort of coldly logical. We're not going to let sentiment get involved. Right? Maybe there's even a touch of that in Mary Poppins, right? Practically perfect people never allow sentiment to get involved. But of course she does, doesn't she? Anyway, she's not quite as mechanical and cold as she was. Now, maybe the author is, if we can trust Emma Thompson's performance in Saving Mr. Banks. I don't know. Apparently she was kind of tough. But anyway, so it's dispassionate, it's amoral. What is the difference between amoral and immoral? Good. It's outside, right? It doesn't worry about it. It just focuses on facts. And later on, I'm going to call James Harthouse is amoral. Right? He's a rake. He just doesn't care. He just does things. Good. He doesn't even take into consideration. Right. Good. That's a good one. They're not against. It's just like sort of saying something like what I said before about the idea of the pre-existence of the soul. I wouldn't call it unbiblical. I would call it abiblical. The Bible doesn't really say anything about it. That's probably not true, but it's not like it's specifically in the Bible against it. So maybe it's there. And again, a lot of times that's what happens. People are amoral. And sometimes they're scarier people because they don't have any counters at all. They're not even doing it to be immoral. They just... That's not a fact. It's sort of like when my son got to studying in Athens for 4 months, many years back, I said to him, the biggest challenge for you is not going to be, when you go to Greece, they're not going to attack your faith. The big challenge is when you go to Greece, like most of Europe, they're going to consider your faith irrelevant. That's almost harder to fight. Right? And that often happens even maybe in a place like LA or something where it's not, I'm not going to your faith. It's irrelevant. If that's what you believe, who cares? I'm a vegetarian, you're this, whatever. It doesn't make a difference, right? So amoral is not even counting that as a marker. That's no longer the way you choose. The way you choose is by utility. Now, of course, the Victorians were okay because they were living on what today people call moral capital. They'd been raised in Judeo-Christian morality, and so it's stuck. But again, if we keep moving farther and farther away, we're going to get in trouble. When it no longer comes, if it hasn't been instilled in you, pretty soon people are just not going to care. So they're amoral. So it's dispassionate, it's amoral, it's mechanistic. Right? Like this. Just follow. Okay? Maria, what does the Godfather say? Nothing personal, just business. You've ever seen The Godfather when they're killing people. Nothing personal, just business. That's kind of, amoral. That's just not, something we have to worry about. We just do what is the best, right? Mechanistic view that often reduced workers, school children, patients, and prisoners to facts and figures that could be plotted on a graph. All right. Bolst and I both actually often quote somebody named Michel Foucault. Now, Foucault is got a great deal of bad stuff to him, okay? But he did actually give a lot of good insights. And he wrote books, about the 19th century afterwards, and he wrote one book called Discipline and Punish. And he showed how, did Bolson talk about this? When you were class? Oh, wow, okay. So, I think he actually did a paper on him or something like that, but I read him a lot when I was in graduate school, too. Yeah, that kind of stuff. He's interesting, Foucault. And he wrote a book on the history of sexuality and then died of AIDS. Anyway, pretty wild guy. But he does say something really true, right? Something really true that when you look back, especially in the 19th century, starting with utilitarianism, you've got this similar way of regimenting people, whether they're school children or prisoners or people in an insane asylum. It's all about, or even to a certain extent, churches are getting like that, right? And Bentham created something called the panopticon. And I find it hysterical that panopto is what I'm getting on there. It's like, I'm a little nervous when they said that name. Panopticon, what does pan mean? What it means? Like Panhellenic? It means all. And optical, so looking all around. And he came up with that design, which is still used and when you're in a penitentiary, you remember those days?
We don't talk about that.
We don't talk about that. So what happens sometimes in a prison, you've seen movies, right? Is you've got this huge courtyard, right? And all the prison cells are all along it. Of course, you can see through. And in the center is a giant tower, and the panopticon is the guy in the tower that can see everything that's happening. Nobody has any privacy whatsoever. They look all around. Right? What's that? Sound, yeah, that's right. The eye of Sauron, right? Or the RA. No, you're a good one. Anyway. Now I take it you did not have COVID, right? You got tested, or you're fine?
Yeah, I'm fine. The people who thought we were.
Oh, you didn't even have any. Oh, that's even better news. Okay, good. Okay. Well, we want to be cautious. Anyway, so. Again, the way school children are regimented is very similar. Prisoners, all that sort of stuff. Everything is about regimentation. And people want to break out of that, okay? And that's what I said. That's why, I may have said this before, but the modern homeschooling movement did not start with conservative Christian families. You know who the original homeschoolers were 50 years ago? They were hippies, okay, who also did not want to be regimented by society. For maybe slightly different reasons than the homeschooling Christian mob, but still, we don't want to be raised by the man, okay? We want to get out of the system, off the grid, as people still say sometimes. But here, there is no place off the grid. There's no place safe. Everything's about regimentation. But it makes things more efficient. Isn't that better? Do you know that in the 19th century, the same utilitarians, they thought that as a method of rehabilitation for prisoners, they used solitary confinement. They thought it would, help them meditate. And they all went insane, and they realized maybe this is not a good idea. Because again, they're not understanding human nature, the need for interaction and whatnot, but they did. In the beginning, they were using it as not as a punishment, but they thought it would actually reform people. So. Yeah, that's a good example. That's right, yes. And it does.
Yeah, it's like we're going to take away part of your executive function so you can executive function better.
I think it's either on Amazon or Netflix is the movie Frances, about Frances Farmer, actress who was pretty crazy. And they did a lobotomy on her. It's a good movie. You see it. It's disturbing. Are you insane? I'm fine, It reminds me of one of my sons. I remember who it was. One of us was a long time ago. We were watching. Remember Indiana Jones 3, the Last Crusade, where the father, Sean Connery, is like, "What are you complaining about? I left you alone when you were a kid. I gave you all the books you wanted. I left you alone, all that sort of stuff, And she's like, "Man, I wish my father had done that for me." She thought that would have been a good thing. Just leave me alone. Let me read. Yeah, there we go. That's right. Just let me read. But But again, this idea of, and that's why I actually believe, this thing's crazy, but I actually think it's more humane to execute a prisoner than put him in prison for life. Well, maybe that's just strange to me. But to me, putting someone in a cage for life, I mean, again, in one sense, that's more humane than killing them, I would say. But at the same time, I don't know. I wonder what's really, let them make their mistakes or whatever. I don't know. It's an interesting concept. I mean, the ultimate utilitarian, a lot of you know Clockwork Orange, where they take the bad guy and they program, because he's like super violent, sexual stuff. And what they do is they trap him to a chair and they make him watch violence and sex and stuff like that. And they keep his eyes open with toothpicks. And they're dripping water. And what they do is, while he's watching it, they're feeding him intravenously with something that makes him like physically ill, like he's going to throw up. And sooner or later, they program him so he can't even do it. If he wants to rape or murder or something like that, he feels so sick he can't do it. So is that guy moral now? That's why it's called the Clockwork Orange, because a Clockwork Orange is something that is mechanical that appears to be organic. And what he's saying is, if you program them, they no longer have free will. They're a robot. Are they really a moral agent? And the guy who wrote that book is actually a Christian, not the guy who made the movie. But
that brought in a sort of like Christian moral to it. But it was printed in the original version because the publishers in America were the only people who would publish it.
Oh.
They didn't think that the last chapter was good. We didn't want to add it into it.
Oh my gosh.
That's the version of the book that Kubrick made the film of.
Oh, okay.
So in New Burgess, it's like the whole book is useless without that last chapter.
That's right, I know. What are we going to say?
Without that last chapter, it's just violence for violence.
Yeah. Anthony Burgess was a Christian. He's the one who wrote the screenplay for Jesus of Nazareth, one of the best lives of Christ. So, yeah, very odd. That's it. But anyway, this is, and why I like this novel too, because it's not only going to help us understand the Victorian age, but we're still wrestling with the same things. We're still in the Victorian age in the sense of, we're still in the Romantic age in the sense that we still have a very romantic view of the arts and all. But in terms of the things we wrestle with, obviously creation and evolution, but is utilitarianism good or bad? What about progress? Is it an absolute good? What about authority? All of these questions we're still wrestling with today. And in that sense, we're most like the Victorians, I think, in our struggles. And we still haven't solved or resolved a lot of these things, right? But again, it's all about facts and figures, all of this. And this is what HBU went through. You saw how messed up. Despite all of the nonsense we're going through with all of this, me and most of my fellow colleagues, you might notice that we're less stressed out than we were last year. Even though this is crazy in terms of COVID, last year was when they were trying to basically make the school utilitarian. They were closing classes. They didn't have enough. They were doing terrible. They're lucky that whole provost is gone. Shouldn't be talking about it. Yeah, I guess it was a good time, yeah. But we were stressed out because that's what they were doing. They were trying to impose a kind of business utilitarian model on a liberal arts university, right? And it got stopped, but so we'll see. So be praying for us all, not just to teachers at the school. But we're doing well. I fear that a lot of Christian schools are going to go out of business after all of this. So we're going to hold on. We're like who's I'm a badger, I am. We hold on. Thoughtful lantern, thank you for Prince Caspian. Anyway, okay. Now, like I said, the rise of utilitarian coincided with the Industrial Revolution and with laissez-faire capitalism. You all heard that phrase before. You know what laissez-faire means? Very good. Let it be. Let go. Hands off. You've all heard that phrase that goes back to Adam Smith, the invisible hand. I'm sure you've learned that. What is that? You know? You ever heard that? The invisible hand means leave the market alone and it will regulate itself. Okay, that's the idea of the invisible hand. Go ahead. Yes, they were the ones that you would say the business of America is business. Hands off and let it go, right? And do that. So this is still, we're going back with this, hands off and let it, that there are market forces that will write things out on their own. Now, they didn't go as far. Anybody ever seen a movie called Wall Street? It's been a long time. Do you remember what Gordon Gekko's motto is? Greed is good. Greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Now, but in a way, that's kind of boundary. We would agree with that. Okay, the quote filthy capitalists, right? Just let it go and let it work itself out. Now, the scariest part of all of it is number 4. Thomas Malthus and David Ricardo, they were utilitarians. Malthus and Ricardo, they came up with something they called the iron law of wages. And the way this worked is, he said, if you pay the workers too much, we're talking about industrial workers now, if you pay the workers too much, and they have enough money, and they can eat a lot, you know what they'll have a lot of? Leisure, but they'll also have a lot of kids, okay? They'll have a lot of children. And if they have a lot of children, what'll happen is it will mess up supply and demand, and when you have a surplus of workers, what happens to wages? They go down. And when the wages go down, the people start dying, and the kids start dying. And then when they start dying off, and there's a few of them, then they can demand higher wages. The wages go up, they have more children. This is what they call the iron law of wages. Go ahead. Yeah, kind of slippery slope. I mean, it's you know the infamous thing that what's the guy, Clinton and Gore. Thank you. It would come to me. You know, Gore did his thing about global warming, and he had this famous graph. Like that, so go on. And you know, it's not just been global warming. It was global cooling before. It was a hole in the ozone layer. When I was a kid, we're all going to die. I mean, it's one thing after another, always. End of the world. But now, let me. You all know a little bit about the iron law of wages because you can all fill in the blank here. Okay. Can we put you? How much money can we put you down for? Nothing. What do you mean nothing? What about the poor? What are the poor going to do? Are there no workhouses? Yes, there are, but many of them would rather die than live there. Then let them do so and decrease the surplus population. Who says that? That's what Scrooge says. And that's exactly what's meant by the iron. When you have a surplus population, then the wages go down and people start to die. And it's like you can't break out of this box. The iron laws are way. And all of this stuff is what's being done. Right? And then in the name of this efficiency, though, a lot of terrible things are done. I mean, look, I'm a very conservative person, but if you look at the beginning of the early 20th century, there needed to be labor unions because it was terrible the way. It wasn't just that the workers were worked to death. They were put in terrible situations where, you know, they can lose an arm or a leg, where whatever the dust would give them cancer, all that sort of stuff. It's terrible, like the chimney sweepers. Right? Right, that was it. And again, and sadly, maybe if they had been really, really raised with a sense of virtue and morality, they might have done it, but they themselves were raised with a utilitarian idea that this is the best. Right? And so we're still struggling with that. Right? Do you want your Walmart? Then you're going to have some exploitation of workers in the third world, right? If you want to give up your Walmart, then boom. And here's the weird thing. Because of Walmart and the exploitation of workers, Americans that are poor can have the kinds of things that only rich people could have in the old days. Now, it might not be glass made in what's that place in Florence, okay? But they can have beautiful things, okay? They may not be beautiful in the sense of they're going to be in a museum of art, right? But they're going to be able to have these things. And
like ethical consumption, so that we can have the illusion of riches.
maybe that's it. Yeah. Yeah. And they do. And of course, you know, this generation, I mean, it may amaze you that, you know, when I was a kid, people actually like fixed things when they broke. Now, throw them out and get a new one. So it's not worth it. It costs you more to bring a worker out to fix your TV than just buy another TV. I mean, it's just, they call it a planned obsolescence. It's like made to break. Usually it breaks right after the warranty's over. That's it? Oh my gosh. Oh, there you go. Ah, see, it used to be no more Maytag. It's still going, but I hold on. And you know what Apple does to you all, because they're absolute thieves. What Apple does is that, yeah, they do. And if I'm not right, if I'm wrong, isn't it impossible to change your battery in an Apple? Oh, you can't. I thought they said some of you can't change your battery. Oh, which is really, really hard. Because like this, I could change the battery. Oh, that's what. Okay, maybe that's the idea. It's really hard. This is not that. And I'm glad the Samsung, because a few times the phone just died, and I had to actually take out the really reboot it by taking out the battery, and then it fixed. But they were saying others it's like impossible to do or extremely difficult. Crazy. See, we're dealing with all of this is part of the same industrial revolution and dealing with this. Now, look at number 5. This is really funny. James Mill, okay, the co-founder of Utilitarian, had a son named John Stuart Mill, and he decided to make him a experiment, if you will. Just like if you were like the kids of what was that guy's name? The box. What's that guy's name? What's that? No.
The one who raised his kids.
The box. What's that guy's name?
I did it. What happened to children had absolutely no socialization?
Oh, wait, you know the guy that was about training kids. Oh yeah.
I just question how much isolation.
Skinner, thank you, Skinner. We call it the Skinner box. B.F. Skinner, thank you. It wouldn't come to me. But again, that's an extreme version of utilitarianism in the terms of raising children. Well, anyway, James Mill raised his son in what you might call, using the terminology here, homeschooling with a vengeance. I mean, seriously. I mean, this kid, by the time he was 7, I mean, he was homeschooled. His father would take long walks. But he, knew Greek and Latin by the time he was 7. He was reading economics. I mean, unbelievable what he learned. I mean, it was brilliant what he learned. But when he was your age, he had a nervous breakdown. Imagine. And I'm not making this up. You would think I was. John Stuart Mill wrote a book called Autobiography. His autobiography. You can read it. It's not that long. And what saved him from his nervous breakdown was reading romantic poetry. It helped sort of rehumanize him and reconnect him. Because the reason Mill had the nervous breakdown is he was all part of utilitarian, making a new world, all that sort of stuff. And he suddenly asked himself the question, if we achieved that utopia, would I be happy? And it's like, no, and then everything crashed. It's like, because you need to keep up the intangibles, right? He became a real advocate for poetry and the importance of poetry and things like that, even though he was still a utilitarian. But we need to also nurture the imaginative side. Afterwards, yeah, he wrote that book. Yeah, and he wrote a lot of books. I mean, he's really famous. He's a famous, really philosopher as well, an economist and different things like that. He wrote about what's it called? The women. What's the liberty and the liberation? It's going out of my mind. Anyway, but he wrote a lot of books. But he was for liberty in almost every sphere. He was a strange dude. He had this platonic relationship with this woman who was married to their best friend. But even though he was really not a believer, he still held to those mores. So they continued to be friends for 15 years until the husband died. Really an odd, interesting. Most Victorians were actually very undersexed. Some of them married a girl and then they had a divorce because he never consummated the wedding. Strange sort of stuff. They were all odd. Yeah, what's that? Tennyson was engaged to this girl for 10 years. They married her. They're all just kind of caught. I see. Every so often, I teach a class on just the Victorians, but like I said, I'm barely able to get any classes to fill now, so it may be a while. But we cover all these people. But but anyway, he wanted a kinder, gentler utilitarianism that would at least feed the sense of wonder and imagination, something beyond the mathematical and the statistical and things like that. And I don't trust statistics. I mean, you do know that 90% of the time statistics lie. So I just made that up. Statistics. It was so funny. My buddy Dr. Bolston, his wife is very much more like a social scientist person. And many years ago, when I was first here, he brought her to one of my speeches. And afterwards, he says, "You want to know what my wife said?" I said, "What?" He said, "She said that your speech was great. She loved the delivery, but there's one thing she didn't like." And I said, "What was that?" He said, "She thought you should use statistics." And then, of course, Bolston and I laughed together. It's like to use statistics. But anyway, it's just really funny. But social scientists. Anyway, what's that? Was that not funny? I guess he didn't. Okay. Thank you. It's a delayed reaction. I'm laughing deep in my throat here. Yeah. I dedicated one of my books to Dr. Wilson. It was pretty cool. It was which one was it? It was C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis, Apologist for Education. That was pretty cool. So, yeah. Well, but I a little bit, but he certainly would like the kind of university Lewis and Tolkien wrote. He goes and fits and starts back and forth. This is good, this is bad. Yeah, that's true. That's true. He's funny. During COVID, when we were talking, he said for a long period during the quarantine, all he could read was comic books. Like his mind wouldn't allow him to read anything else but comic books. Okay. He's the kind of guy that went back and reread the entire Game of Thrones books, all of them, and then he'll go back and reread all the Star Wars novels. Who has time for this? What is he like you? I don't think he read as fast as Claire. He should be in the honors college. I don't know when he does this, when he has time to do this. Maybe that's it. I don't know. Dr. Bolson teaches writing. That both sides, anyway, but he teaches writing. But we always go back and forth. It's fun. Have you ever seen? Oh, he's a vampire. Very good. Give me a second there. Okay, very good. Yeah, maybe he's a vampire. Okay, you can see it. Anyway, I'm a vampire because I stay up all night, but I still do sleep at some point. But anyway, yeah, there's something there.
So you're just nocturnal.
Nocturnal. I am a nocturnal. Anyway, all right, where was I? Okay, so again, he number 6. Mill wants a little bit kinder, gentler utilitarianism that allows for the affections, for the feelings, for the imagination, for poetry, for the intangible things that can't be plotted on a graph. Right? Like people that expect us to defend teaching Latin on a graph. And that's why we have to always say, well, it teaches critical thinking skills and all. But it's like, no, you just don't get it. Okay? It's like people that, you ever been at a church where they come in and people come in to, what's the word? They want to help you improve your church. And they get focused on all these little things and, bylaws and stuff. Yeah, it's just, strange dreams, I don't know. I know, yeah, it's weird. It's weird, But that's what I mean, and that's why people get worried. If we're using a pure business model in a liberal arts university, is that what we are? We're not. We shouldn't be. We've got to be careful, and that kind of thinking was really bad, And unfortunately, that kind of thinking is very strong among conservative Christians, Baptists, who are really into capitalism and stuff. And it's like they buy into this idea. Efficiency is the most important thing. If they're not efficient, throw them out. It's like, they're intangibles, okay? It's different than that. No, they are. I mean, there's been, more changing. The kind of evangelicals that come to HBU are more, but a lot of them, traditionally are not as much. I remember John Mark Reynolds, when he came and spoke for HBU for the faculty the first time, he was speaking in Beelan Chapel. I'm sure you've all been to Beelan Chapel, which is beautiful. And he said, I am so happy to be speaking here. He said, I can't tell you how many Baptist places I go to speak about the importance of beauty, and I'm speaking in the ugliest room you've ever seen. And he's right. I mean, they need super tall skyscrapers and glass and steel, and that's why I love to go to England. That's why I love to go to the Riverwalk. It's human, right? You ever go to the Riverwalk? Have you been there? What I love about the Riverwalk is that there is nothing standard. Every time you turn, every doorway, every arch, everything looks unique. You notice that? It's not like put out in a plan like that. It's unique. That's why people love New Orleans is like that too, especially the French Quarter. Places like Savannah, places like San Francisco. They're unique. Everything's not the same. Have you ever driven around and noticed that every place looks the same now? The same kind of strip mall, and they're not bad looking strip malls. They're usually they're not. Well, actually, to tell you what, the one that is actually somewhat pretty, when you drive down 59 towards Sugarland and you pass the fountains where there's a movie theater, that looks kind of pretty. That area there's like a man-made lake and bridges and stuff. That's kind of neat. I don't know whoever did that. But anyway. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Okay, so let's something a little bit. All right, let's come out. I want to get you guys ready here. You guys get me off. Okay, now, here are some other critics of utilitarianism. I just mentioned quickly, John Ruskin. He was a famous art critic. And he said, and he kind of said what I just told you, right? That everybody in England can now have pretty glass beads. But they're all made by a machine. No more do we have the beauty. He wrote a book about Venice, Venetian glass and things like that. And Venetian glass is the most precious and beautiful, but it's not standardized. Every piece of that glass looks different, and it's not perfect. And he said perfection is a sign of sort of inanimate objects, not a sign of human beings. And what he says, if you want precision, if you want everything to look exactly the same, and it's kind of funny that this started in England, because when I was a kid and I went to England, nothing was standard in England. America was more like that, but it started. The Industrial Revolution started in where everything is exactly the same. And he said the trouble is that if you're going to make everything the same, you've got to sort of dehumanize your workers. You've got to turn them into, hands. So they're reduced to hands and they're nothing else. You all know about the idea of the assembly line. Everybody does a little piece. And he was raging. And he said, look, it does mean you can get cheap products. He would have said, if he lived now, you could go to Walmart. But what you're losing is the humanity and individuality of this work. I will tell you, if you ever go to D.C., make sure you go to our National Cathedral, because that's beautiful. They try to make it like a Gothic building, and they really spend a lot of money, whatever. But, I mean, it is beautiful. It's nice to see something that they put so much care into, just like an old Gothic cathedral. Oh, they make you pay down? Oh, is it the crypt, maybe? That we used to call the crypt? Oh, really? Huh. It's kind of a shame, yeah. Yes, yeah. When you go to London, you have to pay to go to St. Paul's, unless you're going to church. Then you can get in. But if you're going as tourists, so that's what everybody is. They go to Evensong and then they walk around a little bit. I know, they're weird. But the museum, the British Museum is free. That's because they feel bad about stealing everything from the rest of the world. So it is free to go to the British Museum. Amazing. Anyway, so John Ruskin said, watch out. You have to make everybody into a cog in a machine. You're going to dehumanize them to get that. Then there was another guy named Thomas Carlyle who said, look, you can give everybody all the food and stuff they want, but if you don't feed their soul, they're going to be empty. All of the utilitarian materialism in the world is not going to satisfy even the lowest shoeshine boy, he says, because the shoeshine boy has a soul that is bigger than his stomach. So there were a lot of critics there, and Dickens is one of them. But what's wonderful is Dickens made his criticism not by writing essays like these other people did, sort of critical essays. He did it by writing a novel that incarnates it and embodies it in a story. And again, to me, this is the one of all Dickens that has maybe the strongest moral. I still think it's a great novel, but it is a little bit more didactic than his other novels. And you can tell that right away. Did you notice what the three parts of this are called? Called sowing, reaping, and garnering. Did anybody look up the word garnering? It means to gather the wheat into the barns. We don't use that word anymore. So you sow the wheat, you reap the wheat, and then you put it in the barn. So sowing, reaping, garnering. And what of course, what is he saying? What's the old phrase? What you reap is what you sow, right? And what he's showing is when you sow utilitarianism, you're not going to like the crop that comes out. Watch what you're making. You're making monsters, whatever. You're creating a monster. Watch out what you're doing. And so it does have that, right? And he's going to show. I call it be a parable writ large. It's like a huge parable, and he's going to show very slowly, logically, systematically the upshot of now specifically he's focused on education, on an educational scheme that's like this. Now, I would say, who's the central character? I would say the central character is actually Gradgrind. And my subtitle for this book would be The Education of Thomas Gradgrind, because he is the one who is going to see the upshot of his experiment. And what makes this book so sad and so tragic is Gradgrind a bad man? At heart, does he not care about his children? I mean, he in his own way, he cares about his children, and he's putting them through this education scheme because they think it's going to be better for him. But he's wrong, but he thinks he's doing good. And that's why it's so important to contrast him with Bounderby, who's a complete, doesn't care about anybody but himself, okay? He is the filthy capitalist, but Gradgrind really thinks he's going to do good things, and he's going to build a great world. He didn't set out to destroy his children, but he does. Thank God for Sissy coming along, save the younger ones. But he's got a system, and he believes in that system, and he uses it himself, okay? He's not like a politician that, creates socialized healthcare and then has a different healthcare plan for his kids, or who wants to destroy what are those called, charter schools, because he can afford to send his kid to an expensive private school. In other words, he is not a hypocrite. He lives the way he does, and he trains his kids in the same way. He's not going to, make all the other children do this and have something special for his kids. So that's what I'm saying. He really does believe in what he's doing. He cares about what he's doing, but he doesn't see the logical outcome. Right? Would you like to go to the Gradgrind school? What a great name for a teacher. Remember the teacher's name? Mr. McChokumchild. Man, we're gonna crush all the wonder out of you. Never wonder. That's almost like somebody saying, "Never say you feel." Right, it's an inside joke for the honors college. Okay, they got it. The head guy, Dr. Hartenberg, drives everybody crazy. If you say "I feel" rather than "I think," he'll jump down your throat.
Which is really funny because he just led a discussion on linguistics, which was stream of consciousness.
Very good. Of course he does. Of course he does. We are also intuitive creatures. We're not only logical creatures. We are intuitive. Sometimes the feel, generally speaking, this is another Bolston thing. The poem itself, the poetry of it affects us in a way that we can't put into words. Oh, good.
And we were talking about that stuff. And there's one guy, we were talking about the progression of imagination, belief, thought, understanding, and everything.
Oh, right.
I feel like this is how we think. I feel, and like, so what are your thoughts on how we think?
I can see sometimes.
We're not talking about the part where you're feeling. This is the part where you're thinking. So, like, it's your thoughts.
That's great. So you can take over for. Right. There is that balance. So the right and left brain, we sort of say today, reason and imagination, logic and intuition. We need those things, right? Oh, that's the only way to put it. Right? That's good. And you're right. What happened here is an imbalance. Dickens is not against trying to build utopia, but we have to be careful the way we do it, or we're going to starve out the people, or they're going to make it to utopia and they're going to hate it. Whatever it's good. They're going to have given their soul up on the way. And again, facts. That's all I want is facts. And there's this great scene where he wants a definition of a horse from Sissy. And Sissy, whose father was from the circus, starts talking about horses. Like, no, you don't know any facts about Sissy. Let's get a boy. This guy bits her. All white, grained out, right? And he just, listen, it's very similar to what we said about before, the difference between what a star is and what it's made of. Right? It's amazing how similar. And it's very possible Lewis had this in mind. He certainly did not like this kind of education. He certainly believed in a rigorous education, Lewis, but not this kind that crushes it. I mean, I love C.S. Lewis, but, if Lewis took over the school, everybody would have to learn like 3 languages. So, and maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's a bad, but forget about me, you're too old to learn languages anymore, right? These Europeans are not smarter than we are, it's just that they learn these languages when they're kids, and they hold them out. What's that? Yeah, see? That doesn't mean you're not smart, by the way, okay? but you grew up with it, right? You grew up with it, you can do it. People can do it. Yeah. It's like, we want all our kids to learn Spanish, so let's start in the 6th grade. What do you mean start in the 6th? Start in the 2nd grade, 1st grade. If you want to learn Spanish, start in
I mean, you also need to like pick a curriculum and stick to it because
Oh, yeah.
Latin at 7 and then changing curriculum every year isn't gonna help either.
drive me crazy. Experience, right? Anyway, again, filling them up. Now, let's look at this. And again, at the center is what happens to Tom Jr., if you will, what happens to Tom and what happens to Louisa, right? And the father meant well, but they're just crushed by it. And let's look. I mean, it almost brings me to tears every time I read this. Start on page 101. The scene when Gradgrind tells Louisa that Bounderby wants to marry her. Right? Oh, page 101. And again, this whole, and notice it's called Father and Daughter, this chapter. It's chapter 15, page 101. Called, we all have the same book, yay! Chapter 15 is what it is. Did I say 5? XV, chapter 15. It's written in Latin. Anyway, at the very top paragraph, it says, "My dear Louisa," said her father, "I prepared you last night to give me your serious attention in the conversation we are now going to have together. You have been so well trained, and you do, I am happy to say, so much justice to the education you have received, that I have perfect confidence in your good sense. You are not impulsive, you are not romantic, you are accustomed to view everything from the strong, dispassionate ground of reason and calculation. From that ground alone, I know you will view and consider what I am going to communicate." Okay? So very different than the Bennett girls, right? I'm proud to say of my own daughter Stacy that she is the silliest girl in all Houston, right? Remember what he says? I've raised the silliest girls in all England or whatever. Remember that? Okay. That's it. Yeah, Friday. You know what he calls him? Yeah, but I guess that's not good. Yeah, but it's still good. He wants him to be. The lower, I guess you're right. It's the lower three, and they're fun, right? But he's raised her absolutely no nonsense. Okay, you're not impulsive, you're not romantic, all of this stuff. You're dispassionate, all that sort of. Maybe not amoral here, but dispassionate. You're disinterested. You just do the facts, right? And Louisa doesn't know any better. The only she knows that there's something missing inside of her, and that's why she's always staring at what? She's always staring at the fire, right? There's something missing. There's a glow of life or something that's missing. There's an emptiness, a hollowness there. So sad. On page 102, they're ready to go. There's silence. And, "Father, do you think I love Mr. Bounderby?" "Well, my child, I cannot take upon myself to say." "Father, do you ask me to love Mr. Bounderby?" My dear Louisa, no, I ask nothing." "Father, does Mr. Bounderby ask me to love him?" "Really, my dear, it is difficult to answer your question." "Difficult to answer it? Yes or no, Father?" "Certainly, my dear, because..." Here was something to demonstrate, and set him up again. "Because the reply depends so materially on the sense in which you use the expression. Now, Mr. Bounderby does not do you the injustice, and does not do himself the injustice, of pretending to anything fanciful, fantastic, or, I am using synonymous terms, sentimental. None of that hogwash. Mr. Bounderby would have seen you grow up under his eye to very little purpose if he could so far forget what is due to your good sense, and to say to him as to address you from any such ground. Therefore, perhaps the expression itself, I merely suggest this to you, my dear, may be a little misplaced." Well, what, in the middle of the next page, "What do you recommend, Father, that I should substitute for the term I used just now? For the misplaced expression." In other words, love. "Louisa, it appears to me that nothing can be plainer. Confining yourself rigidly to fact, the question of fact, you state to yourself, is, does Mr. Bounderby ask me to marry him? Yes, he does. The sole remaining question then is, shall I marry him? I think nothing can be plainer than that." Shall I marry him? Precisely. That's the question. "No, Father," he says, I lost it. He says, "My dear Louisa, to know that you do not come to the consideration of that question with the previous habits of mind and habits of life that belong to many young women. No, Father, I do not. I now leave you to judge for yourself. I have stated the case as such cases are usually stated among practical minds. I have stated it as the case of your mother and myself was stated in its time. The rest, my dear Louisa, is for you to decide." And then there's this moment that is just gut-wrenching and so sad. From the beginning, Louisa had sat looking at him fixedly. As he now leaned back in his chair and bent his deep-set eyes upon her in turn, perhaps he might have seen one wavering moment in her, when she was impelled to throw herself upon his breast and give him the pent-up confidences of her heart. But to see it, he must have overleapt at a bound the artificial barriers he had for many years been erecting between himself and all those subtle essences of humanity which will elude the utmost cunning of algebra until the last trumpet ever to be sounded shall blow even algebra to wreck. The barriers were too many and too high for such a leap. With his unbending, utilitarian, matter-of-fact face, he hardened her again, and the moment shot away into the plumbless depths of the past to mingle with all the lost opportunities that are drowned there. It's so sad. He does not hate his daughter. He loves his daughter, but he doesn't have it in himself. He can't give her what he doesn't have and what he has spent so much time getting rid of in himself. He thinks he's doing best. Just like the parents in this school, often it's parents from India and Pakistan, they really think they're doing their kids the best by forcing them to be doctors. Now, some of them may want to be doctors, but others don't want to be at all. I've taught many of those students. Okay, but in no way are those parents hate their kids. They think they're doing the best for their kids by forcing them to be doctors, right? And so it's that kind of stuff, right? And Americans have gone back and forth in that. I grew up in an area that was very much Jewish, and often now the Jewish kids were lucky; they were allowed to be doctors or lawyers. They had one choice. Okay, but again, incredible pressure put on these kids. Don't do that. I mean, being a doctor is not something frivolous. Can you imagine being a doctor and hating your job every minute? Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah, really. They hurt your patients and stuff like that. What are you doing there? You know, it's strange. But so what I mean, I'm using that example because I talk to these parents and sometimes I explain to them, you know, there are other jobs than just doctor, you know, and they're just inflexible, but they're not. They really think they're doing the best for their kids. I mean, they are good parents, and from their point of view, they're being good parents. I mean, this is the thing. This is why Dickens makes it hard for us. To me, the closest thing I've ever read to the sad tragedy of this is actually in The Lord of the Rings. Tolkien said that there's two parts in The Lord of the Rings that always made him cry when he read it himself again. One was the sound of the horns of Rohan at cock's crow at the Battle of Pelennor Fields when they came to the rescue. Do you remember what the other one was? Is that Scouring the Shire? It's a part that's not exactly in the movie. Okay, there's a scene when Frodo and Sam are asleep. And Frodo's like asleep in Sam's lap, and all of these things, right? Yeah, Gollum, right? And Gollum comes upon them and sees them, and he sees the close love between Frodo and Sam. And just for a moment, if you looked at him, he looked like an old hobbit, beyond his years, beyond all joy and hope. And there's just a slight moment when something glows in him, and then what kills it? Remember? Sam wakes up and says, "Good, why are you sneaking around? Sneak!" And then it's gone forever. Now, I think Lewis probably had this in mind. I don't know if Tolkien had this in mind. Dickens was, past 1066, so, but Lewis did like Dickens. Yeah, it's just past 1066. It's not important. What's that?
Tolkien was the good that happened.
Yeah, he was the good that happened of 1066. That's right. You could just skip. Actually, just start with Beowulf and then just skip right to Lord of the Rings. Right? Anyway. Something in between, right? Crazy stuff. But anyway, so again, there's this chance, but you see, the thing is that she wants to do it, but she doesn't know how to do it, and he doesn't know how to receive it, and he can't leap over that. But he loves her, as we'll see later. Removing her eyes from him, she sat so long, looking silently towards the town, that he said at length, "Are you consulting the chimneys of the Coketown Works, Louisa?" You've all seen the smokestacks that we're talking about. She says, "There seems to be nothing there but languid and monotonous smoke. Yet when the night comes, fire bursts out, Father." Of course I know that, Louise. I do not see the application of the remark. To do him justice, he did not at all. What is she trying? I don't think she understands. What is she trying to convey? Right? During the day, there's just monotonous smoke. But every so often, fire bursts out. There's something inside her. She doesn't understand it. She's like reaching to that metaphor for some spark that she wants lit inside of her. But again, that's she doesn't understand. He doesn't understand. Again, the title is Fathers and Daughters, the title of this chapter. She passed it away with a slight motion of her hand, and concentrating her attention upon him again, said, "Father, I have often thought that life is very short." Watch this. This was so distinctly one of his subjects that he interposed. You know, this guy that doesn't know how to deal with people, and he just jumps for something that he knows. Well, it is short, no doubt, my dear. Still, the average duration of human life is proved to have increased of late years. The calculations of various life assurances and annuity offices, among other figures, which cannot go wrong, have established the fact. And then she says, "I speak of my own life, Father." I mean, this to me is more powerful than any essay that I read or statistics and stuff like that, right? Wow. Oh, indeed. Still, I need not point out to you, Louisa, that it is governed by the laws which govern lives in the aggregate. Again, this is an individual life, and an individual life matters. And he can't think that way, and he doesn't think that way for himself either. While it lasts, I would wish to do the little I can, and the little I am fit for. What does it matter? I hope none of you have gotten to that low point. What does it matter? Okay. When I feel like that, that's when I start quoting Hamlet, right? Fie on it, 'tis an unweeded garden grown to seed, things rank and gross in nature possess it merely. I'm like that. This happens to me sometimes in the fall, where I get sick, and then as soon as I get better, the weather changes again, and then I get sick again, and then I get bad. It's like the perfect storm. Don't worry, I don't have COVID. I mean, just and with allergies. You know, it's just like every time it gets better, then it gets worse, and it goes on for like 4 months. You know, until what does Hamlet say? What does he say? For some reason, I have lost all of my mirth, I think is what he says, right? Feel like that. What's that? Yeah, whatever he said, yeah. Poor Hamlet. I have lost my mirth. Now, on the bottom of page 105, it gets even sadder, because then, you know, the father notices, he doesn't know what to make of this. What does it matter? Oh, I'm just going to, you know, I mean, sometimes people are like that. All right, I just want to get by, you know, with my life and not cause too many waves and move on, and that's it. We don't want to settle, right? You girls all know about that, settling. Okay. Don't settle. That means just picking up a guy, you know, whatever. Don't settle. Wait. But don't wait forever. Anyway, I know, see, that's the problem. Anyway. A settler and a reacher. There we go. There we go. See, it's like, don't settle. And she's the settle. He goes. We got to get a meme of Abigail saying that. That's just great. Okay. Anyway, I don't do those things, but I got to see that. Anyway. Oh my Lord. Anyway, so the father, kind of confused, like, well, I never thought about this, but Louisa, is there somebody else, you know, that you're in love with? And then the pathos is so strong towards the bottom of the page. Father, what other proposal can have been made to me? Whom have I seen? Where have I been? What are my heart's experiences? I've been a Phi Lam for all these years. That joke, is Phi Lam even around? I used to love to make Phi Lam jokes, but like nobody even knows what that is, do they? That's it? I don't know. The old Phi Lam jokes. But anyway, he says, "My dear Louisa," returned Mr. Gradgrind, "you correct me justly. I merely wish to destroy..." Gradgrind is happy. She's getting sadder as he's happy. And she's talking about how she doesn't know anybody and has no understanding of feelings. And Gradgrind's like, yeah, wait a minute. Okay. "What do I know, Father," said Louisa, "of tastes and fancies, of aspirations and affections, of all that part of my nature in which such light things might have been nourished? What escape have I had from problems that could be demonstrated and realities that could be grasped?" As she said it, she unconsciously closed her hand as if upon a solid object and slowly opened it, as though she were releasing dust or ash. That's the kind of embers of her life. It's kind of sad. What's it? Oh, yeah, that's a good point. I think about that. That's right. Yeah, there's nothing but death there. Yeah, sad. I mean, there is. You know, the thing about this is like Lord of the Rings in that there's a sort of elegiac mood hanging over all of it, as we're going to see when we get to In Memoriam too. And I like that, books like that. Anyway, "My dear," she said, Quite true, quite true. Why, Father? What a strange question to ask me. She's like hung up on this now. The baby preference that even I have heard of as common among children has never had its innocent resting place in my breast. You have been so careful of me that I never had a child's heart. You have trained me so well that I never dreamed a child's dream. You have dealt so wisely with me, Father, from my cradle to this hour, that I never had a child's belief or a child's fear. And you would think that Mr. Gradgrind would cry right now, but it says, he was quite moved by his success. My dear Louisa, you abundantly repay my care. Kiss me, my dear girl. You don't understand. I mean, he thinks this is a success, right? And the poor foolish mother, all she cares about is, what am I going to call Mr. Bounderby now? I can't call him son. But she doesn't know any better herself. It's sad. The last thing she says he dies is, I think there's an ology that your father didn't know about, right? But anyway, what you reap is what you sow. It's because Louisa doesn't understand her own heart that she finally gives in and gets married, because there's only one thing she loves in life, and that's what? Tom, right? And Tom terribly manipulates her. He's the whelp, as they call him. He's the whelp. And so he becomes a whelp. She becomes sort of emotionally stunted. And it's not in any way that she's like tempted by adultery. It's that she doesn't know her own heart, and she falls for heart out. Now this is a Victorian novel, so they don't even kiss, much less go farther than that. But she's tempted because she doesn't understand her own heart. And his motto, Harthaus's motto, is what will be, will be. How do you say that in Spanish? Que sera, sera. You've heard it more that way. Whatever will be was the song too. Whatever will be, will be. And she, I mean, I guess it's his amoral blase that she's sort of attracted to. This person seems to have risen above it. And she doesn't actually, but she almost runs off with him. And she goes back to her father, and her father has to see her fall at his feet in an insensible heap. This is the upshot of my experience. And then, to give him credit, he realizes, maybe there's something I missed, right? The first chapter is called One Thing Needful, Another Thing Needful. And you remember, Martha says to Jesus, hey, why don't you tell Mary to come in the kitchen and help me out? And Jesus says, oh, Martha, Martha, there are so few things needful, only one. Your sister has found it, Mary, and it will not be taken away from her. That's the one thing needful, right? And by the way, it wasn't until the third time I read this, and it's not even in your outline because I didn't figure it out till later. Why is Sissy always keeping that bottle of 7 oils for her father? Remember Mary says, I will keep this ointment to anoint you when you die, right? So it's another link to that same story of Martha and Mary. And then pick up the third time I read it. Oh my! That's why they keep coming back to it. She still holds on to that belief. So there's something more. And we'll talk about it more next time. But Tom, again, becomes a whelp. He uses his sister. He literally frames poor innocent Stephen Blackpool. And did you understand? Well, we'll talk about it more next time. But just as you're thinking about your paper, what does he say to his father when his father says, how can you do this to me, son? And he says, well, Father, given so many workers, such a percent of workers will cheat. It's figures. How can I fight statistics and figures, Father? Take consolation in that. Right? So we'll talk about it more. As you think about it for your paper, good job. And we'll finish this. And again, bring that outline to get us ready for in memoriam. And that's why you don't have to email me this time. I want you to get going on your papers and stuff like that. So, okay, let me stop this.